Monsters coming down the hall, spires cover all the walls. Serial killer is on the line, wants to know if you have the time. Aliens are landing soon, this will mean certain doom. A chainsaw sputters and comes alive, blood and death are close behind. One thing you can be certain of, the zombies just can't get enough. Just one more bite is all they want. The ghosts downstairs are on the hunt. The Shade Chronicles are keeping score, that's what all the writing's for. They record their stories one by one so you don't miss all the fun.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Shade Chronicles, a podcast featuring short works of sci-fi and horror fiction. Here are your hosts.
Hi, this is Derek Leftridge.
Hi, this is Lawrence Trokey, and thank you for spending your time with us. Let's get started with our first story.
The Shade Chronicles are keeping score, that's what all the writing's for. They record their stories one by one so you don't miss all the fun.
Just Another Day by Derek Leftridge. During the late afternoon shift at Little Mary's bar, when many older gentlemen from the surrounding neighborhood go daily to get their drink on, one in particular sits at the bar and begins to talk to the bartender. The bartender at this time of day is an older woman with short hair, and even though with weathered skin from time in the sun, she is still in good shape and quick to give the old man a beer from the cooler as he settles into his seat at the bar. The older gentleman nods and takes hold of the beer bottle and pulls a long drink off of it. He then audibly makes an ah noise and nods again to the bartender. The bartender finishes wiping her hands on a towel behind the bar, looks up at the older gentleman and says, "Hi there, is your wife working today?" "Not sure," the older gentleman says while spinning his beer bottle on the paperboard coaster. "She left while I was in the shower, but still not sure if she went to work or just shopping." The bartender replies, "Didn't you say last time you were in that tomorrow is your anniversary?" "Yes, it is." He sets his beer down on the coaster the bartender dealt to him when she got him his beer. "You have a good memory, and a lot better than mine, because I did forget to get her something, but she has so much stuff I don't think she would notice." The bartender smiles slightly, pushes a small laminated lunch menu towards him and nods. "Well, I'm sure she would like to have something from you, no matter how much she has." The man drops his eyes, lowers his head, blinks down at the bar while taking a final drink of his first beer, and sets the empty bottle on the bar. Without looking up or making eye contact with the bartender, he moves the menu closer to him so he can read the specials that he already knows. Seeing this reaction, the bartender quickly replies, "I'm sorry, it is none of my business, and you're here to relax and have some drinks." The man lifts his hand, waves it, and shakes his head to say, "No problem." The bartender throws an empty beer bottle in the trash with a crash, removes the top off another beer bottle, and sets it in front of him. The man smiles and inquires, "You have children, right?" "Well, yes, I do." The bartender finishes drying out a glass and flips a towel onto her shoulder. She then says, "If I remember right, you have children too, correct?" The man makes a dramatic, surprised gesture and slaps his hand down on the bar, not aggressively, but with a loud tap. "There is that memory again. You got the brains and the beauty. Yes, I have a son. Have a daughter also, but she's no longer around and does not call or communicate. I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter. I hope nothing bad occurred for her to not be around. Does your son live nearby?" "I believe the daughter had some type of issue that had to do with me, but I never really got a clear answer. Now the son lives with us, yes," he replies with a smile. "Moved in with the wife and I a few years ago because he had some life-changing occurrence, and between you and me and the light post, I believe it was an early midlife crisis." The man tips up the beer bottle and with one large drink drains another beer. The bartender, seeing his beer is gone, grabs another and with one motion pops the cap off and sets it on his coaster. "That's right, you mentioned that before, and he is the one who drops you off here, right?" "Yes, it is. He drives me around most places lately," the man responds. At this time, both become silent. Then, to break the silence, the man taps the beer bottle on the coaster and announces to the bar, "This beautiful lady is stalking me. Please help." They both laugh. She turns to give another customer some attention at the bar, and the man says to himself, "He is my personal Uber driver, and I do appreciate it." The older man smiles to himself and looks up at one of the many televisions above the bar mirror. He's not paying attention or worried that the game that is on is a replay from the night before. He's feeling nostalgic about his life and his children. It has always been something he thinks about from time to time, in that his daughter and son both changed after he got back from the doctor after a routine visit. His wife and he went, and when they got home, his wife had a conversation with his daughter and son. Their daughter screamed and just left the home, never to return, and their son went after her but returned without her. The next thing, his son has moved in, and no one talks about his daughter. After what seemed like a few seconds, but is 10 minutes in real time, the older man drains another beer, puts it on the ledge of the inside of the bar. He looks in the direction of the bartender and motions her over. She quickly excuses herself from another customer and says, "I'm sorry, I did not know you were ready for another." She quickly reaches into the cooler, pops the bottle cap off, and sets the beer on the coaster, and at this same instance, the old man places his hand on hers. He quietly asks, "Will you help me with something?" The bartender leans down to him and says, "Of course." She stands up and looks to the other couple at the bar she was just talking to as they are leaving, and she says, "Okay, I'll see you next time. Drive safe." Then she leans in close to the man. "What can I help you with?" He increases his grasp on her hand, looks into her eyes, and says, "I would like you to help me kill my wife." She pulls her hand back, startled by the question, but not out of his grasp. He explains, 5 months ago, my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and I prayed to God to save her and heal her. She puts her other hand onto their embraced hands. "I'm so sorry to hear that." He continues, 3 months ago, it got worse, and I decided that going to the Lord was not the choice. So I made a deal with the demon. "Oh," she straightened up in surprise. "Wow, so what happened next?" He pulls his hand from hers, grasps his beer, takes a drink, not breaking eye contact. "The cancer went away, and she got better. But the demon has to be paid for their help, and the payment is pain and misery." The bartender again leans into the man and says, "I'm confused. If your wife no longer has cancer, then why do you want to have her killed?" He grins and responds, "After everything I did, I found out she was interested in someone at work, and now I want her to be the one suffering the pain and misery." He then explains, "Also, there is a large amount of inheritance that will go to me if she dies, and with your help, I'll split it with you." The bartender moves her hands from the edge of the bar and wipes them on her bar towel. She looks at the man and says quietly, "Okay, I will help." For the next hour, as people come in and some leave, they go over the details of the murder and set up a plan. They make a plan to meet at the bar the next day to finalize their plans and follow through with the killing. The next day, the man walks into the bar and notices his bartender is not working, so someone else is behind the bar. A few moments later, his lady bartender friend comes into the bar and sits down next to him. She kisses him on the cheek and says, "Hi, baby, how are you?" He responds, "Great now that you're here." That evening, when Archie and his wife get home, she announces she is going to bed, and he responds he is going to sit up for a while. He settles into his recliner, and as soon as he reclines, he begins to have a feeling of sleepiness overcome him. Archie is not passing out or falling asleep, but he is succumbing to a trance state. The room feels electric and begins to fill with a misty fog as footsteps can be heard walking up behind him.
"Hello, Archie. Just wanted to check in with you and see how you're doing."
The guttural sound of the demon fills Archie's head. "Yes," Archie replies. "Is today when the pain and misery begins?" The demon responds,
"Oh, Archie, as we have discussed before, your pain and misery started some time ago. It is masked by what the medical field calls Alzheimer's."
Archie nods his head slowly in response. The demon continues,
"Again, your pain and misery payment is to experience the gut-wrenching feeling of your wife recovering from a debilitating disease and then find comfort in someone else."
"This is a terrible thing to do to someone," Archie says in a tone that sounds like he is talking about someone else. The demon laughs slightly.
"Yes, it truly is. And to add to my entertainment, I have you experience this every day."
"Wow, you are a true son of a bitch," Archie says with a slight laugh of his own. The demon turns to walk away and says,
"I am very glad you did not have the patience to wait for the help your beloved higher power would have given you for this situation. See you soon, Archie."
As the demon begins to return to the dark shadows of the room and from where he came, the mist begins to dissipate, and Archie quietly replies, "Okay, until next time." The next day, Archie's son brings him to the bar, and he sits in his regular spot. The bartender, his wife, grabs a bottle of beer from the cooler, takes the top off, sets it in front of Archie, and asks, "Hi there, is your wife working today?" "Not sure," Archie replies, while spinning his beer bottle on the paperboard coaster.
For 2 seasons, the Shade Chronicles podcast has introduced you to a universe of the scary, strange, weird, and fascinating. Now all of the stories from the first 2 seasons of the podcast are collected and available in a hardback book for your reading enjoyment. Newly edited and revised, experience the fright and wonder again of the stories from the Shade Chronicles, and join us on an exploration of imagination. Find your copy of Tales from the Shade Chronicles podcast on Amazon today, also available in paperback and Kindle versions.
Mean Girls Never Die by Mark Connelly. Heather Van Vale glanced at her watch, grabbed her purse, phone, and laptop, and headed out. Fridays were always killers, especially at the end of the month when her sales reps were struggling to make quota. She could count on a flurry of calls, texts, and emails full of excuses and questions. Once in her BMW, she snapped on her shoulder belt, wedged her phone into the dashboard holder, and took off. It had rained during the night, and the roadway was slick with wet leaves. She sped along the straightaway, then slowed to turn onto Mountain View Drive that snaked down the steep hillside to Grandview and the interstate. She was about to turn on the radio to catch the news when she got a call. "Heather, it's Becca Stein. I had Glencoe on my charts for this week, but they're closed till the 30th on inventory audit. I can call on Frederico and Cross early so it falls in October. Is that okay? It's not due for renewal until November, but can I call early and have it count for this month?" "No problem, thanks for the heads up. I should have told you about Glencoe. We can make the switch." "It's not that big an account, but I think I can squeeze in Palmetto this week before close of month." "That's good. Just touch base when you sign them so I can book it." Heather twisted her neck back and forth, sensing she needed a massage with her afternoon workout. Her phone rang again. "Heather Rondo?" "Yes," she answered slowly, having not been addressed by her parents' name in decades. "I know it was Dickerson, then Goldman, and now Van Vale. 3 husbands, 2 nice alimonies. Current husband a litigator, 2 children in college, your own franchise." "May I help you?" Heather asked sharply. There was a pause. The woman sounded young, maybe a college kid. "You probably don't remember me, Nancy Farber." "Should I?" "Staples High. You were friends with Jessica Payne and Pamela Goodman. Boys called you the Playmates of Westport. Everyone said you looked like Nikki Taylor, but I thought you were more Cindy Crawford." "Can I help you?" "You don't remember me, do you? Nancy Farber." "I'm afraid I don't." "I voted for you to be prom queen. I always liked you. But you told everyone I looked like a cross between Elvira and the Pillsbury Doughboy? That wasn't nice, Heather. I just wanted to be your friend. But you made fun of me for not having a date for prom. It's not my fault I wasn't pretty like you. I just wanted you to like me." "Listen," Heather said curtly, "I don't know who you are. I don't remember any Nancy Farber. That was over 30 years ago. What kind of gag is this?" Gripping the wheel, she slowed as the road curved sharply. "I have to go. Have a nice day." "Heather, you ruined my life, so now I have to ruin yours." Heather reached up to end the call when the car lurched forward, gathering speed. She took her foot off the accelerator and frantically pumped the brakes, but the car raced forward and the steering wheel locked. Cursing, she jerked the wheel back and forth for control. Plowing straight ahead, the BMW slammed into the guardrail, flipped over, and slid down the hillside, coming to rest against a clump of oaks that showered the shattered car with yellow leaves. The weather was perfect for a walk, so Jessica Miller dismissed her driver and crossed Rockefeller Center, pausing to watch the news girl doing a remote in front of the skating rink. She smiled, recalling her on-air days with NBC. So much work, but so much fun then. So much easier to get ratings in those days. No competition from YouTube, podcasts, and Netflix. Now in marketing, she faced the constant battle with sponsors who threw social media in her face at every negotiation. As usual, she stopped at the Big Apple for coffee. As soon as she entered, a new waiter pointed to the lone vacant table. "Black French roast, large," she said briskly. "Of course." The waiter nodded with a lingering smile. Returning quickly with a steaming pot, he poured the coffee slowly, giving her a longer smile. A strange, smug smile. She took a burning sip, then slipped out her phone to check her email. There was the usual stream of ads, reminders, and routine messages. She sipped her coffee, noting a rancid taste. At least it was hot. She scrolled up and down her inbox, looking for replies from GM or Allstate. Nothing. Hearing a beep, she tapped her message logo. "Jessica Payne, am I right?" "It's Miller now. Can I help you?" "You probably don't remember me." "Nancy Farber, Staples High?" "I'm sorry, I don't recognize. Here's my yearbook picture." "Remember me now?" "Are you sure you have the right person?" "Were we friends?" "I wanted to be your friend. I had such a girl crush on you. You were so beautiful and had so many boyfriends. I never had anybody. Look, I don't understand. You were so mean to me. I heard you call me Piggy." "I don't remember." I do. They say sticks and stones. Words don't hurt me." "No, words hurt. Words kill. Your words killed me. Now you have to know how it feels." "Who is this? What is this about?" "Enjoy your coffee?" "What the fuck? Some ChatGPT prank? Some weird alumni message?" She hadn't heard from Heather in 8 or 9 years. Was this one of her goofs? She sipped more coffee. It tasted bitter, so she sipped from the Fiji bottle in her bag, then chewed a stick of spearmint extra. She slipped money under her cup, stood, stretched, then left. Noticing the bright sunlight, she paused at the door to don her glasses. Glancing back, she noticed the smiling waiter was gone. She pushed through the revolving door and headed down the block. Crossing 5th, Jessica felt her stomach clench as if she were about to retch. The sun seemed suddenly bright and hot, and she felt faint. Seeking shade, she ducked under the black awnings of Saks, leaning against a window to catch her breath. An intense spasm made her double over and pant for breath. Her mouth filled with bitter fluid, and she felt her knees buckle. "Hey, lady, are you okay?" a man asked, then shouted to his companion, "Babe, call 911. I think she's..." Jessica looked up but only saw black spots against the sky just before she hit the pavement. A late afternoon breeze blew across the narrow balcony. Juan Les Pins was so much nicer in early fall. The beaches and streets were clear of summer tourists, and it was still warm enough to bathe or just lie on the sand. Pamela Josen chuckled. On her first trip to Antibes with her new husband, she told him it reminded her of La Jolla, with its curving streets, pricey shops, and views of the ocean. Louis sighed, "Comme c'est américain," then squeezed her with a kiss. She put down her book and glanced at the clock. She agreed to meet Louis at Le Crystal for drinks at 5. She went to the bathroom to freshen up, brushing her hair and putting on lipstick. When her phone beeped, she expected it to be Louis or perhaps her daughter in Boston. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a girl's voice. "You probably don't remember me." "Okay, and you are?" "Nancy Farber." I don't recall. You have the right number?" "You're Pamela from Staples High. Friends with Heather and Jessica, right?" "Oh, God, sure, high school. The old gang for sure." "But you don't remember me? Nancy Farber?" "Well, it was a long time ago, you know." "Not for me." The voice deepened. "Oh, you girls were so special. I remember when you all dressed up like the girls on Baywatch for the talent show. Those red bathing suits. You all looked so hot. Everyone said you were prettier than Erica Aliniak." "Those were the days." Jessica chuckled, patting herself, remembering her smooth, flat stomach. "Wish I could fit in that suit now." "And you were in the school plays. I saw every one of them. And senior year, you were at the Westport Country Playhouse. I saw that play 3 times. You were so good. And you got your picture in the paper with Paul Newman. You were so popular? Something in the voice was eerie, unearthly, and troubling. Well, look, I still can't place you. Were we in drama class or cheerleading together? The senior trip to Cancun? No, I wasn't in anything. Nobody liked me. I never went on any trips. We didn't have money for trips. I didn't live at a big house on Old Hill Road like you. We just had a ranch house on Greens Farms Road. Your father worked with Goldman Sachs. My father sold shoes in Norwalk, and my mother managed a bakery. We weren't special like you. I really liked you, and I thought you were nice and not stuck up like Heather and Jessica. You never called me names, but you went along with them. Both of them. Like a conspiracy. Look, that was decades ago. We were teenagers. It still hurts me. Look, where are you calling from, are you? I know where you are. That's all that's important. Where you are and what has to happen. Don't bother trying to call Heather or Jessica. They're gone. They're gone? And you will be too. Then my work will be finished. I'll be able to rest. The call ended. Pamela shook her head. What the hell was that? She couldn't wait to tell Louis. She grabbed her purse, left their hotel room, walked to the end of the corridor and pressed the down button on the elevator. The golden doors slid back and she pressed the lobby button. The doors closed, then the elevator car, all braking and safety devices disabled, fell 5 flights and crashed on the basement floor. In the back of the SUV roaring down I-87, Frank Miller worked his laptop and his phone. He had wanted to catch a flight from Albany. The governor had offered use of a state plane, but his assistant assured him driving would be faster. Using his flashers, the state trooper sailed past slower vehicles, hitting 90 and sometimes 100. His phone rang. "Frank, how are you holding up?" his assistant asked. "I've been trying to get the kids. Jerry's at Princeton and Moira's still in Chicago. The police found Jessica's phone. She got some threats just before it happened. The police sent me screenshots. Did you get them?" "I have Kelly and security working on the info now. No dice on the number yet, but following up on Nancy Farber. Kelly's talking with Connecticut now. 1 second." Frank heard a murmur of muted voices. "Are you sure? Double-checked? For sure? Really? Okay." His assistant cleared his throat. "Frank, this is what Kelly found out from the state, the Westport paper, and the school district. I'm sending you something. That's Jessica, right?" "That her yearbook picture?" "Yes. Then scroll up, see Farber? That's the same picture someone sent your wife." "Yes." "They were both seniors. Class of 91. But Frank, Nancy Farber killed herself shortly after graduation, over the 4th of July holiday. Death certificate had name, address, and date of birth that matched the school records. Paper had the article and obit in their files. Did you get that, Frank? Frank, you still there?" Frank glanced at his wife's teenage face, then looked out the window at the October trees racing past in a shimmering blur of green and gold.
Attention Shade Chronicle Podcast listeners. The merchandise store is now open. You can find the merchandise store on the merchandise tab on the Shade Chronicles website, which is at theshadechronicles.com. Find premium t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, travel mugs, ball caps, and more at the Shade Chronicles Podcast merchandise store. We now resume your regular programming.
Galway Banshee by Sean O'Neill. Like most of the kids in the neighbourhood, Eamon McTaver loved the old school stories. In particular, he loved the scary ones. However, for him, the stories had to be authentic and consistent with true Celtic history. He understood the cultural history better than most adults, and he had gotten good at sniffing out a fraud. The kids in their neighbourhood were lucky as a handful of legendary storytellers, ones who had learned the lore from the generations before them, were still part of the southern Galway community. On special nights, these storytellers would share their legends with the local kids. One night, not unlike many others back in those simple days, a story was told, and when it was done, Eamon wished he had never heard it. It was summer, the Irish version that is, and many of the locals had set up a fire along the cold Irish Sea. It was common for families to gather together on Saturday nights on the long stretch of beach and share the warmth of both the fire and the community. It was also common for those of age to enjoy some of the finer products of Ireland, namely Guinness and Jameson. Thus, it wasn't uncommon for the storytelling to evolve from there. It was a cool summer night, Eamon recalled, when a man stepped out of the dark to tell his story. As he slowly entered the firelight, Eamon looked over at his father. That night, his father didn't look back. Unusual, to say the least. The man made his way around what had become a blazing fire. He walked slowly, seemingly with purpose. He was particularly tall, Eamon remembered, with a harshness in his form. He also couldn't remember ever seeing the man before, but the adults that night appeared to know him. They all gave him a wide berth and free rein around the fire, something that generally had to be earned. In his 2 silent passes around the flames, the man ensured to make eye contact with every man, woman, and child seated there that night. Generally anxious for such stories, Eamon surprised himself when, on the first pass, he avoided the man's gaze. His curiosity got the better of him the second time around, however. Eyes met, and the hook was sunk. With his 2 turns done, the man stopped and stood, hauntingly, above the flames. The light flickering on his face made him appear almost mystical. In the damp Irish air, he began. "Ye all like tall tales, don't ye?" he asked. Most of the boys around the fire cheered, although there were some, like Eamon, who were quiet. He was caught in the build-up of the story. "Well, let me tell you about life, death, and the scream of a banshee." The fire dimmed, as if on command. "When I was young, me grandfather brought me out to the old cemetery off Dingle Road. You'll know where that is?" Many around the fire nodded uncomfortably. The truth was that most of them knew the cemetery and kept well away from it. The nodding enticed the man to continue. He looked up at the sky and walked around the fire once again. Eamon looked over at his father, who continued to look away. "Well, that was where I first heard this tale. It's no mystery around these parts that folks would steal things, little trinkets mostly, from the waiting dead. They would steal these things hoping the waiting dead wouldn't rise again," the man said as he stepped back from the fire. He stood still for a moment or two in the darkness. "Well, what is more of a mystery is how often the waiting dead would retrieve these items," he added with the slightest tremor in his voice. He took one more step out into the darkness until only the outline of his form was visible. Worse was what happened to those who had stolen these items. Me great-grandfather, Patrick O'Sullivan, worked the night shift at that old cemetery back in the Black Days, back in 47. From all accounts, he was a good man, but like most of the Irish in those days, he didn't have 2 punts to his name. The man stepped forward to the fire once again. He grabbed the end of a burning branch and pulled it to his face, where he lit the cigarette that hung out of his mouth. In the light, Eamon could see the scars on the man's face. He tossed the burning branch back into the fire and stepped back into the darkness. Now, me great-grandmother, Mary Catherine O'Sullivan, was quite a catch in her day. Patrick, as the story goes, had always felt that he never gave her enough, despite her claims to the contrary. He took a haul of his cigarette, creating an eerie lighting on his face. One night, a British ship ran into some rocks and sank off the coast, right here, the man said, waving his arm, cigarette in hand, out to the dark sea. Hearing the bells, the fishermen made their way out to the sinking ship. There were some survivors, but given the cold of the sea, most of them were in distress. By the time the boys had gotten them to shore, only a few survived. Amongst the few was one young woman that was brought to that cemetery and placed in the waiting morgue. Why she was brought there, well, that's anyone's guess. Some say it was payback to the British, as the young woman appeared to be of royal descent. The man stopped for a moment and took a long haul of his fading cigarette. Me great-grandfather, arriving for his midnight shift, found the girl in one of the waiting coffins. By his account, she was most certainly dead. The rumour about town following the incident was that she was dressed in the finest of silk and wore jewellery beyond the reach of all of Ireland. In a moment of weakness, Patrick removed a necklace from around the young lass's neck and quickly placed it in his pocket. Come the end of his shift, a doctor arrived and pronounced the young woman deceased. Patrick returned home with what he must have felt was a brilliant gift for his wife. The man turned away for a moment and flicked his cigarette out into the Irish Sea. The pause only heightened the tension. That evening, with the children tucked quietly away, Patrick presented his beautiful wife with the gift, one he knew was worthy of her. He paused to catch a breath of sea air. She was initially taken aback. It wasn't a time for such indulgences. Patrick, however, managed to convince her that the necklace wasn't as costly as it appeared. She accepted it and placed it around her neck, unaware of its true origins. The group around the fire were completely mesmerised, eyes locked on the man. Later that night, Patrick headed off, as usual, to his shift at the cemetery. When he returned in the morning, his beautiful wife was gone. While he summoned the authorities, no traces of her could be found. The man shifted somewhat, as if uncomfortable in his clothes, and then continued. Despite his emotions, he made his way into work that night. It was a time where work was rare, and he feared losing his job. When he arrived at the cemetery for his shift, he was told that one of the graves had been robbed. It was the grave of the young British woman. He took a step back from the fire before going on. Not surprised, given the number of graveyard thefts, Patrick grabbed a fellow worker and attended to the grave. The earth had been removed, but the cheap wooden box was still in place and closed. Patrick carefully climbed down into the cold earth, and once in place, he slowly opened the wooden coffin. Inside was not the British woman. No, inside was his wife, dead. Upon seeing her there, Patrick screamed a scream such as few had ever heard before. The man stepped back into the firelight. His face appeared distorted. To this day, it isn't known whether the scream was Patrick's or that of a banshee, he said, visibly trembling. He turned and walked briskly away from the fire. As he did, a horrific scream ripped through everyone sitting there. It was a female voice. The fire momentarily dimmed, as if something had blown through it before returning to its previous state. The adults all immediately leapt to their feet, grabbed their children, and ran from the fire. As they ran, Eamon looked up at his father to see the fear on his face. "Father, was that a banshee?" he asked. His father never replied.
Okay, well, that was episode 3, and we're going to do some commentary on that. The first story was actually mine, called Just Another Day, and it was one that I was trying to get into the mindset of, I guess, considering Alzheimer's, but it was kind of like a Groundhog Day horror story in the sense that it had a demon involved in it.
Or did it?
Well...
That's my question, but I'll save it. I'll save it. Go ahead.
Right. But this person basically was living, in his mind, a new day each day, but actually living the same day in reality every day by going to the bar, talking to the bartender who ended up being his wife, and she's in on the understanding of his mind issue. And so there were hints in there of what was going on, here and there, bringing us to the point that he and his wife, you get to reveal that they're together, and then he gets visited by, as you said, something that either was real or not, and then at the end of it, we kind of go back to just kind of starting the day over again. Just a short kind of story, kind of bringing all that together, and that's basically where that was kind of influenced from.
Yeah, so, I got to say, of all the stories that you've written thus far, this one was the trickiest, in my opinion, because you may not have meant to take it any deeper than what I'm going to do.
Okay.
But in my mind, I'm like, is this really a deal with the demon? And this guy is cursed by the demon as his punishment for providing the medical services to his wife, that he's cursed to repeat the same day over and over again, thinking that his wife is cheating on him and blah, blah, blah. Or is this all just the goddamn disease, right?
Right.
I mean, this could almost be featured on, the Hallmark Channel as a movie. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way.
That's fine.
No, but there's that emotional tug at the heart that this poor guy, he doesn't know what reality is. And, maybe he's convinced himself that he's made this deal with the devil in his illness, in his delusional state. And that's why he feels justified in his actions later about wanting to kill his wife, because he did all of this stuff. He sacrificed himself for her. And then she ends up feeling better and is like, woohoo, party town, and takes off. So that's why I'm just in this, mind twisted space that you've put me in. And it's like, do I feel sorry for him?
Right.
Or do I feel anger at him for wanting to kill his wife after doing all this stuff and making this deal with a devil or demon? So I'm perplexed.
Yes, it is kind of a twisted kind of thing, and the demon part of it was something to kind of bring it back to kind of our genre of what we're talking about. And that was something I think was important for the story, to keep it in that vein.
Sure.
To be able to give it that way. Be it in his mind or not, don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to say at this point, yes, there was something, but it could have been more on the mind part of it. And going back to the wife cheating on him, she was actually cheating on him with him.
Yes.
So that's where that kind of connection there came, just to kind of see both sides of what this guy is not seeing.
Right.
To give, behind the curtain for the people. And yeah, it was I can't say it was enjoyable, because Alzheimer's is a horrible thing to write about.
Right.
But it was not really just an Alzheimer's story. It was something to do with having an issue, but then also the issues brought on by something that's evil.
Yeah, I thought it was
could be Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I thought it was a great and unique twist.
Thank you.
Describing that problem. So, job well done there. So, the next story we have to talk about is from an author that was featured in our last episode, Mark Connelly. And this one is called Mean Girls Never Die. And it was quite an interesting, another alternative revenge story. And coming back from the grave. I mean, last episode we had the Indulgia del Gale. I'm screwing that name up. But again, kind of a revenge story there from the grave type of thing. And now we've got another version of that. But Mark, I think, does a real neat job of bringing it into modern times with all of the technology, which I think you're going to talk about here.
Right. Yeah, I like the whole idea of, it just real speaks to me whenever there's a story and there's something mystical about it, in the sense of, the person coming from the grave. I really like that I get into that. And then I like the breakdown of the individual people and how this person is contacting them. And it's just a traditional revenge story, bring it into the nowadays. And it is I think it's very, it keeps your attention.
Yes.
Very much so throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, good.
Wanting to know what's going to happen next, even to the very end when one of the husbands was involved.
Yes.
Or and getting the information and things like that. I thought that was really what kept me into it, and it was a good story.
Yeah, I thought he did a nice job, and again, that when you think back on all the sins of your past in terms of what you did as a kid in high school, not really understanding the implications of how a mean comment or just a shitty attitude towards somebody could affect them going forward. And then you get later in life and you look back and you realize, some of those things that happened back then. Maybe that's why a lot of people don't like their high school experience because of all the crap
Yeah.
that they had to
This
deal
is
with.
very much a story that makes you reflect.
Yeah, for sure, and,
Yeah.
and start to own up to your own poor behavior and bad
Right.
judgments and the mean things that you might have done to those that were less cool or less popular
Or look different
or more
or-
plugged in.
yeah.
And it was all just, kind of this thing where you're just trying to get higher up in the pecking order. You're just trying to make yourself look better by putting down these other folks
Right.
who were easy targets, depending on how far up the chain you were.
Right.
So, but these girls that ended up being the victims, these women that ended up being the victims, were obviously at the height of popularity.
Right.
And they were only going to stay, up there and be the ones that everyone longed to be like,
Yeah.
but then just knew that they could never achieve that because of their wealth and their beauty and
Right.
all the other good things that come along with that. So
And
I thought
I did catch myself
Uh-huh.
rooting on the
ghost?
the ghost, because how they
Yeah.
were all dismissive and all that type
Yeah.
of stuff.
Well,
And
I mean, I
just to
gotta
buy
be
into the
honest.
story. I mean, I like the
Yeah.
story. It's obviously what it is.
The
but
the last one, I can't remember her name, the character, but she was, sympathetic in some ways.
yeah,
and
and
the way
I like that too.
Yeah, the way
Yeah.
he kind of described her, it was kind of more like she, as she grew up and became a woman and got older in life, life happened like it happened to everyone else. And
Right.
we gained weight and we,
Yeah.
are not the stellar, beautiful, popular person that we were way
Right.
back then.
But it's great that the ghost person did not let that person off the
yeah,
hook.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so the ghost was really pissed and wanted to make sure that she got her ounce of flesh, which she
Yes.
did and then some. So anyway, Mark, nice job on that one. We appreciate that for you sharing that with us. And then the next one, Galway Banshee. What do you got?
Galway Banshee was a great campfire horror story. It
Yeah.
was, and the audio, I got to say, with a lot of these stories now, the work you're doing with the audio is really enhancing things
Yeah.
to the point of I can hear it in my head without the audio, and this just brings it to life, and it makes it a whole lot better. This story especially. And I like the characters. I like the background story of where this all is coming from. Introducing the Banshee and why this is the way it is. And again, I keep saying this, but very much an environment and an atmosphere that puts me in there.
Right. And what I loved about it is this. Well, the author is Sean O'Neill, and of course, he's Irish or of Irish descent, and this is a very much a traditional. Or I don't know if it's a traditional ghost story in the Irish culture, but it really feels like it. Not having encountered much of that, this was very much in the telling of it, had the pacing and the flow of a great, like you said, campfire ghost story with an heavy Irish flavor. And I think he did a great job of engaging the reader in the story, drawing us in with the storyteller who's telling the story, and then the big reveal at the end with the
Loved it.
banshee scream. It's kind of like all those other campfire horror or ghost stories where the killer or whatever jumps out at the end and scares all the people
Right, yeah.
around the campfire. It's just kind of a gag or whatever. But
Yeah.
so again, it was a classic. It had that classic feel to it.
Very much so.
And it was just a job well done, again, with that story. So Sean O'Neill and Galway Banshee on that one, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Anything else to add to that?
No, it was just a great, Irish lore story. in a sense of
for
horror.
sure.
And I'll probably tell that to some young grandchildren in my life.
Right. So with that, we're going to wrap up episode 3 of season 3 of the Shade Chronicles. But before we go, we want to remind you all about the book that's out there now on Amazon, available in hardback, paperback, and Kindle editions. That is Tales from the Shade Chronicles Podcast. And this book features stories from seasons 1 and 2. They've been newly revised and expanded for your reading enjoyment, and it's available on Amazon right now. You can search for it by name and be able to pick one of those up. We would greatly appreciate it if you did. Anything else to add to that?
The Kindle version, I have that one on my Kindle, and I've been reading it actually in the evenings, a couple of our stories here and there just to see, looking at it. Love that there's art in the book, too. All of our art that was on the podcast that's in the book. The softback or the paperback is pretty thick. I like it, though. I like the
it's a
the
comfortable
quality of
size.
It is, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and the hardback one is really cool. It's like a storybook size. It's very large, but it's very.
It's a storybook for adults.
That's right, a storybook for adults, and it is really cool. And I want all of you too to pay attention to the cover, because in the background there is great art from the episodes, and it's a little game I like to play, trying to figure out which ones they are, and I help write most of the stories, and I still enjoy it.
Yes, for sure. So make sure you check that out, and right now we will turn it over to the preview for episode 4, which is coming up right now. Next time on The Shade Chronicles. Power Max stood atop his opponent with his heavily armored boot on his chest. Laser Wolf lay bleeding, struggling to breathe under the weight of the boot.
You fought bravely, Laser Wolf, but your term has come to an end. Today, justice will be served.
Ah, give me a fucking break, you megalomaniac. You may think you're doing something noble here, but we both know what you really are, a stone-cold killer. Power Max smiled at the insult. Then he quickly pressed his armored boot into the chest cavity of Laser Wolf, crushing through the armor, then flesh and bone. Laser Wolf gasped loudly, and then his head fell back to the roof decking, his eyes as wide as saucers, gazing into eternity.
Dagon opened his tired eyes and saw nothing, only blackness. Lightning from the continuous storm flashed, alighting briefly the oval-shaped interior of the ship's steerage. Dagon saw the 6 other members of his species chosen to board the ship, including Enlil and Nabu, with whom he had the closest bond. He had children with Nabu, but they weren't chosen to make the voyage. They were now somewhere at the bottom of this new, supernaturally raging sea. Sea monkeys. Lightning again struck. The ship creaked in the wind as if to at any moment split and sink. They had been at sea for nearly 150 days. Noah was becoming more panicked and paranoid by the week. Whenever he came down to the steerage, which was rare, the torch he carried flickered in the darkness and showed the thick-bearded face of a man driven to megalomaniacal insanity.
Thanks again for listening to The Shade Chronicles. For comments or inquiries, you can contact us at shadechron@gmail.com. That's SHADECHRON@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also get more information at theshadechronicles.com. The Shade Chronicles Podcast is the creative property of Derek Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey. Any attempt to replay for broadcast or distribution portions of any episode of The Shade Chronicles without the prior written consent from the creators and/or significant compensation is strictly prohibited. Shame on you for even thinking about it in the first place. Thanks again for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Shade Chronicles.